Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Qrow's Corner, a show for a quick review of this week's episode of RWBY. And as always, there will be spoilers. And this week we're talking about episode 4.10, Kuroyuri, which was released on January 21st, 2017. And just fair warning, this is another long one. There was a lot in this episode. Last week we got a pretty important World of Remnant episode about the Great War, and I will mention that later in this discussion. Suffice it to say, I do have a theory about what is going on in Mistral, and the key word there is definitely theory. So the episode opens up with Oscar leaving his farm to head to Haven, well, obviously with some reluctance. But he does seem to be accepting what Ozpin is telling him in his own head. It's a brave new world out there for him. But as he's trying to buy a train ticket and failing to do so, he comes across someone we haven't seen in a while. Hazel, one of Salem's minions, shows up and gives him a hand, get it, so he can get his train ticket. Obviously, we know that Hazel cannot be trusted, and apparently so does Ozpin. But what he says is interesting. He says, don't let a small obstacle block your path. Though we know his mission is to find the Spring Maiden, so we don't know exactly the context of this statement. Aside from Ozpin recognizing him from his past, there really isn't much else in this scene except reminding us of Hazel. We then go back to RWBY and Jean arriving in Kuroyuri with Qrow, and they find the village is deserted and destroyed. Now amidst the ruins, we get a glimpse of a bottle with the Lotus logo, not unlike Ren's emblem. Given the damage to the town, RWBY and Jean wonder if they'll be able to find any help at all. And while he doesn't outright say it, Jean indicates he knows why Ren didn't want to come to this town. Now it's something that we theorized, namely this is where Ren's parents died, so they proceed to tell us. We finally get Ren's origin story, as well as the first real flashback not narrated by a character. This is the first time it's happened in the show. Kuroyuri is the village where Ren grew up. Ren specifically. I've actually been mispronouncing his name all along. And both of his parents were very much alive at this point. Since we know he's an orphan, we know where this goes. Ren was an innocent spirit as a child, and you might even say he was optimistic to a fault. And he definitely has his mother An's eyes. And her fashion sense, apparently. While looking for a gift for his father, like cat bread, he comes across 3 bullies and a little girl. And that girl is in fact Nora. She was apparently on her own as an orphan when they met, most likely abandoned by her family. Even then, she had some spunk, but both of them obviously have some confidence issues at this point in time. Now out of fear, Ren starts to run away, only to run into his father, literally, compelling the bullies themselves to flee. This is where we meet Ren's father, Lee, who will make an awesome cosplay for a lucky fan. Lee challenges his son about running away, saying taking no action is the worst kind of action. And this is huge because it gives us that perspective we've always known about Ren. He is courageous and he is determined. And it also makes you think back to Volume 2 when he was disappointed that they couldn't go help a village. That's his character. Now clearly Ren respects his father and maybe even fears him, and that has really shaped who he is now. Back in the present, while tending to Qrow, Jean and RWBY hear a distant grim noise. Now obviously Jean is less worried about himself and more about Ren and Nora in the mountains. And this is where we get some good Jean characterization here. Because RWBY, on the other hand, is starting to regret involving them all in her quest to go to Haven. But Jean reminds her that they're all in the same boat. They all lost someone dear to them. And so, love him or hate him, at least Jean has that good heart. He has that leader's heart. So then we go back to the past where Ren is awoken by his frantic parents and the sound of a grim attack. It's here we learn that Lee is not actually a huntsman, he was just a hunter, and they actually need a huntsman for this level of grim attack. And that's when the roof caves in, and we can only assume that An is killed in the attack. So Lee rescues his son, but the town is falling apart in the attack, and that is when we see this one that was referred to when they were in Oniyuri. This Grimm, whose hoof prints we've seen, is indeed a very large horse and rider Grimm. Now I'll concede, sort of, regarding the hooves in previous episodes, but I will get to that. And perhaps because he isn't a huntsman, Lee stands his ground, but he is possibly killed. But before this, he gives Ren a dagger and some parting words of encouragement. But as he's fleeing the Grimm in fear, Ren espies Nora, who's also hiding out in fear. And this is when we finally learn Ren's semblance. It's tranquility. This is really great because it means he can make himself and others invisible to Grimm by calming their negative emotions. That lotus flower really does mean something, doesn't it? And he does just that, protecting Nora from a fairly aggressive Nevermore. In doing this, he gives himself confidence, but he also gives her confidence, as well as a little wooden hammer, because of course he would. And this, above all else, certainly explains why Nora is so clingy to Ren. So then back in the present, Ren and Nora come upon a cave full of swords and presumably blood. They also find a flag of Shion village as well, meaning a lot of people have tried and failed to kill this Grimm. In the cave, though, Ren also finds an arrow which is identical to the one his father had, hence why I said he was possibly killed. And of course, in the blood is the hoof print we've seen, along with a direct path to Kuroyuri. And yes, that horse Grimm is headed right toward RWBY, Jean, and Uncle Bad Luck right now. So like I said, I will concede that I was wrong about the hoof prints before, thinking they were a symbol. But here's why I'm disappointed. If Ren had any sense, he would have told RWBY and Jean about the beast. He knew about it in Shion, and should have said something then about this massive beast. And then when they split up, both he and Nora seemed to skirt the issue with vague talk. Now there's either a reason we don't know yet why they didn't say this, or this was a narrative oversight by the writers. I get trying to build suspense, but this is almost reckless putting these characters in danger. But what we saw in the last episode could still be a symbol, meant to be a warning. Every time we've seen it, we've only seen it one at a time, and you would think there would be more if they're footprints. And the size of it changes as well, so you'd think RWBY and Jean would notice a footprint that big in the middle of the path. Now, the way the Grimm have attacked these villages also seems to be coordinated, and we know from Salem that the Grimm do have coordinated attacks. So here it is, my crackpot theory. What if these Grimm attacks are intentional to keep these villages subjugated? What we learned in this World of Remnant episode is that the Emperor of Mistral did just that before the Great War. And in Oniyuri, Ren said that the council was not happy that they tried to start their own mini-kingdom. There's clearly a division between these small villages and the government in Mistral. Knowing how the Grimm operate, the government of Mistral could be using an agent like the bandits to draw out the Grimm, forcing these attacks on settlements that are more independent. And since Ren's father said he had to talk to the mayor with some urgency, and shortly after that the Grimm attack, it certainly makes you wonder. But again, that's just a theory. I don't have a lot of evidence to back that up, just based on what I've seen in the episodes. Overall, this was definitely a solid episode, though I am a little disappointed how they revealed the beast. We finally got the backstory for Ren, and it was tragic, but also hopeful for him and Nora. And as with each new episode, the world of RWBY is getting so much larger and so much more intricate. With only 2 episodes left, they won't wrap up much, but this is looking like it will be a wild ending. Maybe Qrow will get a heroic death after all. Let me know your thoughts on this episode. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Was there anything that I missed? Were there any nuances that you picked up on? And that does it for this episode of Qrow's Corner, and I'll see you guys next time. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Nice work. Good job. If you like what you saw, you can just go ahead and click that subscribe button for all videos past and future. You can also head over to my website and see all the other stuff that I do, including the books I've written. So go ahead, click stuff.